All right, strap in, everybody. We're going deep today. We're talking the Joe Rogan experience, and wow, you guys did not hold back on the source material.
Yeah, someone did their homework.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Articles, interviews, timelines, the whole 9 yards. You really want to get to the bottom of this one.
For sure. It's everywhere, right?
Oh, yeah. It's huge EE, and it sparked a lot of debate. So let's figure out how this podcast became such a, well, phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, it's more than a podcast at this point. It's a full-blown cultural thing. Science, comedy, politics, even like conspiracy theories.
It's true. Whatever's trending, Rogan's probably had someone on to talk about it.
Uh-huh.
So before we go there, let's back up a sec. Who is Joe Rogan?
Right, because the guy's done it all.
Seriously. Comedian, actor, UFC commentator.
Don't forget Fear Factor. I mean, come on.
No, man. Who could forget those stunts?
I think it's that whole mix of experiences that makes him such a good interviewer, you know? He's not just some, like, journalist in a suit. He's been in the trenches. Stand-up comedy, the octagon, having people eat bugs on TV. I think that's why he connects with so many different people.
Yeah, he can relate to pretty much anyone.
Exactly.
So, okay, Fear Factor aside, stand-up is really where he got his start. We're talking way back, late 80s.
Yeah.
Then, fast forward to 2009, he launches the JRE.
And that timing, that was key.
Oh, for sure, podcasting was just starting to get big.
It wasn't just luck, though. I think Rogan really saw the potential in it early on. Those long-form conversations, that was his thing from the beginning.
Yeah. When everyone else was doing, 30-minute interviews?
Right. He's going for hours, digging deep into all these topics. Turns out people loved it.
Yeah, 3 hours with one guest. That's commitment.
It's a different kind of podcast, for sure.
So is that what helped launch him to the top? I mean, everyone knows about that Spotify deal in 2020.
Oh, yeah, the big one.
$100 million.
It wasn't just about Rogan, though, right?
True.
I mean, it was Spotify saying, we are all in on podcasting, and JRE was the crown jewel. That's when podcasts became, like, serious business.
It's crazy. $100 million just for talking to people.
Well, he's talked to a lot of people.
That's what I'm wondering. How many episodes are we talking? Hundreds.
Thousands. Over 1,800. Not even counting the ones Spotify took down. And each one is a deep dive,
Yeah.
Whether it's Elon Musk talking science.
Oh, yeah. The Elon Musk episodes are legendary.
Or like Dr. Rhonda Patrick on health and fitness.
Right. And then, let's be honest, he goes down some rabbit holes, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Thousands of episodes, super relaxed vibe. And this guy's willing to ask anything. No wonder people are hooked.
It's compelling, for sure.
But it's not just about the topics, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's this whole long-form thing. What is it about that format that works so well?
I think it's that it feels real, like you're just eavesdropping on a conversation.
Yeah.
Two smart people geeking out, no script, just going wherever the conversation flows. It's unpredictable. You could start with nutrition and end up talking about philosophy. Who knows?
So it's like the journey is as important as the destination.
Exactly.
Okay, but a podcast is only as good as its guests. And Rogan seems to get everyone. I mean, we'll talk about the controversial ones later.
Mm-hmm.
But why do they want to be on his show? It's not like he's lobbing softballs, right?
No, not at all. I think it's because guests know they're going to have an actual conversation.
Right.
He listens, he's genuinely curious, and he'll push back if he disagrees. But it's not like a gotcha interview. He wants to understand.
So people feel comfortable opening up.
Yeah, I think so. And in a world of like carefully managed interviews and sound bites, that's pretty rare.
So it's like Rogan's this everyman,
Yeah.
breaking down those walls, letting people just be themselves.
Yeah, totally. And for guests, it's huge exposure. Millions of listeners. It's like the podcasting version of being on Time magazine.
Okay, so we've got this huge platform, a host who can talk to anyone, and a format that lets the conversation go anywhere. But what are they actually talking about? I mean, the sources you sent cover everything. Science, health, even conspiracies.
It's all over the place, yeah. But there are some themes that pop up, like Rogan's fascination with science and technology, for example.
Oh, yeah. He loves that stuff.
Yeah.
And he gets some pretty big names.
He does.
I mean, Elon Musk talking about colonizing Mars,
yeah.
the future of AI, and then they're smoking weed on the podcast. That's not your typical interview.
It's definitely not your average podcast.
Yeah, they get into some deep stuff.
They do. It's not all just spectacle. And it's not just Musk either. He's had Neil deGrasse Tyson on talking about the universe.
Right.
Lex Fridman talking about AI ethics. It's like the future of humanity all laid out.
And it's not all super serious either, right? He gets into the fringe science stuff too. UFOs, paranormal,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Those episodes are something else. Bob Lazar, talking about reverse engineering alien tech. People who say they've met aliens. It's wild.
Like a real-life X-Files. But he always keeps a healthy dose of skepticism.
Yeah, always questioning.
Okay, so we've got rocket science, aliens, but there's also this whole health and fitness thing. And that feels really personal to him. All the keto talk, the different diets.
He's definitely into it, that's for sure. He wants to optimize, like, his body and mind, and he's always sharing what he's learned. Whether it's keto or carnivore or different workout routines, he's bringing on the experts.
And people listen to him on that stuff.
Yeah, especially when it's someone like Dr. Rhonda Patrick. She's like a rock star in the nutrition world.
It's interesting how those conversations often go beyond just physical health, too. He gets into the mental well-being side. Meditation, mindfulness, even like psychedelics for therapy.
Right. Andrew Huberman, Paul Stamets, he's had them all on.
Okay, so we've got science, the paranormal, health and fitness. But we can't wrap this up without talking about the elephant in the room, right? Politics.
Yeah, that's where things get a little complicated.
Complicated how? What kind of political stuff is he getting into?
He's not afraid to talk about anything. Free speech, censorship, elections, you name it. And he brings on a wide range of guests for those conversations.
So some heavy, potentially divisive topics. But isn't that kind of his thing? Creating a space where any wide conversation can happen. He's interviewed Bernie Sanders, Tulsi Gabbard, right alongside people who are, let's say, more fringe.
Exactly. And that's where the controversy comes in. Some people say it's open-mindedness, hearing all sides. Others say it's giving a platform to dangerous viewpoints.
It's a tough line to walk. And it feels like he's walking it with everyone watching, too. Everyone's got an opinion on Joe Rogan.
Yeah, and they're usually strong opinions.
They are.
Those strong opinions have led to some, let's say, blowback, especially around COVID-19 and vaccines. That's where things really heated up. But before we get into all that, let's finish exploring this whole popularity thing. It's not all debates and controversial guests.
No, definitely not. He's actually got a great sense of humor. A lot of the conversations are just fun. I mean, he started as a stand-up comedian, right?
He did. And it shows. He's had on so many comedians. Bill Burr, Tom Segura, Kevin Hart. Those episodes are hilarious. Like, just hanging out with your funny friends.
So it's not all just intellectual. It's entertaining, too. Something for everyone.
I think that's a big part of it. It's hard to put JRE in a box. It's highbrow and lowbrow, serious and silly. It's Rogan, basically. Curious, opinionated, and always up for a good time.
Okay, we've covered a lot, but I'm dying to unpack those controversies.
Yeah.
You mentioned some serious backlash, especially around COVID-19 and vaccines. Where do we even start with that?
Well, you got to remember that JRE blew up during the pandemic. Everyone's stuck at home looking for information. And he's putting out these marathon episodes about COVID. Doctors, scientists, even some, let's say, alternative voices.
So like the perfect storm, captive audience, super relevant topic.
Exactly.
But when did the controversy really kick in? Was it just about having different opinions, or did it get more specific?
It really exploded when he started having guests who questioned, the mainstream narrative, like masks, lockdowns, especially vaccines. Some of these guests were promoting stuff that directly contradicted, like the CDC and WHO.
Ah, okay. So that's where the misinformation accusations come from. Especially with the vaccine stuff, things got really tense.
Yeah, it was a very sensitive time. People were scared, looking for answers. And some of them found those answers on Rogan's podcast, even if those answers weren't, scientifically backed.
And to be fair, he did have on guests who were pro-vaccine, following the guidelines, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't all one-sided.
True. He had Dr. Fauci on, for example. They had a whole discussion about vaccines. But for some people, the problem was that Rogan didn't, shut down those more controversial views. He didn't explicitly contradict them.
So it's that neutral host stance that got him in trouble.
Yeah.
Even though that's, his whole thing, letting the conversation happen without taking sides.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. Some felt like he was giving equal weight to fringe theories and, established science, which they argued was irresponsible considering how many people listened to him. There were even calls for Spotify to, remove JRE entirely or censor certain episodes.
Whoa, censor a podcast? That seems extreme. What does Spotify do?
They did end up taking down a few dozen episodes, ones they consider, really problematic, but they mostly stood by Rogan, saying it was about free speech and open dialogue.
It's a tricky situation for sure.
Yeah.
You want to protect people from misinformation, but you don't want to shut down debate or censor people.
Yeah. Tough call. No easy answers there. But the controversy definitely showed the power that comes with having a platform like Rogan's.
Okay, so the COVID stuff was huge, but that's not the only area where he's sparked debate, right? What about his political views? The sources hinted at some heated discussions there, too.
He definitely has opinions, and he's not afraid to share them. That's rubbed some people the wrong way, for sure. He's been called a brocialist, accused of being too right-wing, platforming far-right figures.
But didn't he endorse Bernie Sanders in 2020? That doesn't exactly scream far-right, does it?
Right. That's where it gets tricky. He's also said good things about Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. He seems to like candidates who are, like, outside the establishment, whether they're on the left or the right.
So maybe it's less about specific policies and more about being anti-establishment, kind of like Rogan himself, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. He likes shaking things up. He's not afraid to go against the grain. And that resonates with a lot of his listeners.
It's like he's the voice for people who feel like the system isn't working for them. Whether they agree with his exact views or not, they like that he's willing to challenge things.
Exactly, and that's why he's so fascinating and so polarizing. You can't easily define him. He's full of contradictions. He pushes boundaries.
And love him or hate him, he gets people talking about important stuff. Even if you disagree with how he does it, the fact that he's sparking these conversations is pretty remarkable.
It is, and despite all the controversy, the show is still hugely popular, consistently ranks as one of the top podcasts in the world, so he must be doing something right.
Something right, something wrong, something totally out there.
Mhm.
It's all part of the Joe Rogan experience. But controversies aside, we have to talk about this empire he's built. Podcast, UFC commentary, stand-up comedy. He even owns a comedy club. It's more than a podcast. It's a brand.
Oh, for sure. And that brand is all about authenticity, curiosity, pushing boundaries. It clearly connects with a lot of people.
And it's made him very, very wealthy. Those sources mentioned a net worth somewhere between $150 and $250 million. Wow. Not bad for a guy who started doing stand-up in, like, dingy clubs, right?
Not bad at all. And it shows you that success these days, it's about more than just talent. It's about building a loyal audience, connecting with them, and just going for it. No fear.
So it's the whole package, the Joe Rogan persona.
Yeah.
He's built this by just being himself, even when it makes people mad.
Pretty much. And that's a good lesson, whether you're a podcaster or just trying to figure out your life. Being authentic, curious, taking risks, it can lead to big things.
All right, so we've talked about the controversies, the empire, the Joe Rogan persona. But before we wrap things up, let's go back to those topic clusters. Because beyond all the headline stuff, there's so much variety to JRE, right? It's not just COVID and politics all the time.
Oh yeah, we've just scratched the surface. There are tons of fascinating conversations happening there. We'd be remiss if we didn't dive back into those.
Right.
So let's get back to it, shall we?
Okay, let's jump back into those fascinating topic clusters. You know, we were talking about Rogan's love for all things science and tech. It's like he's always trying to understand the big picture, the cutting edge, all of that.
It's like a constant quest for knowledge, and we're all along for the ride. It's not just about understanding the science itself. It's about, like, thinking about the implications, the ethics, how it affects humanity.
Yeah, and it's not a boring science lecture. He gets genuinely excited about this stuff. Remember that episode with Elon Musk about colonizing Mars? It felt like we were right there with them, planning the mission.
And it wasn't just pie-in-the-sky dreaming either. They talked about the real challenges, the resources, the ethics of putting a colony on another planet. Pretty mind-blowing stuff.
It makes you think, you know, what would it actually take to make Mars our second home? What kind of society would we build there? The risks, the rewards, the whole thing.
And those are exactly the kind of questions Rogan loves to explore. He's not afraid to get philosophical, to delve into those big existential questions that we all think about.
Speaking of existential questions, we can't forget about those episodes where he goes full X-Files, right? Aliens, UFOs, government conspiracies. He's not afraid to go down those rabbit holes, the stuff that makes you question everything.
Those are always wild. He has people on who claim to have worked on top-secret government projects, people who say they've met aliens, people who are convinced the truth is out there. They're not shy about sharing their stories.
It's like a peek behind the curtain of reality, you know? Whether you believe it or not, it's fascinating to hear those accounts.
Right, alternative perspective.
Exactly. And Rogan isn't just sitting there passively. He pushes back, asks tough questions, wants evidence. He's not just trying to entertain. He's trying to get to the bottom of things.
He really is.
So it's not just sensationalism. There's a real curiosity there, a desire to understand the unknown, even if it's weird.
Totally. And that open-mindedness, that willingness to explore the fringes, that's something a lot of his listeners really appreciate. It's a break from the mainstream, a chance to consider possibilities that people usually dismiss.
And, you know, it's not all aliens and conspiracies either. He gets into personal growth and self-improvement too, right? He's had former Navy SEALs, athletes, entrepreneurs, all talking about overcoming challenges, building resilience, achieving goals.
Those episodes are so inspiring. It's not just about physical fitness or being successful in business. It's about mental toughness, discipline, the power of your mindset.
Yeah, like those conversations with Jocko Willink and David Goggins, those guys are all about pushing yourself to the limit, like a boot camp for your mind.
For real. And that message, it connects with all kinds of people, athletes, students, anyone who's facing challenges. It's powerful to hear those stories about resilience and determination.
It's like Rogan's created this community of people who are all trying to be their best selves, like on a journey of self-discovery and growth together.
And that sense of community is a big part of it. People feel connected to JRE. It's more than just a podcast. It's a movement, a whole tribe of people looking for knowledge and growth, trying to understand the world better.
So if we zoom out and look at the big picture, what can we say about the Joe Rogan experience? It's more than just a podcast. It's a cultural phenomenon, a platform for exploring all these fascinating, controversial topics.
And it's a reflection of Rogan himself, too. Curious, outspoken, completely unapologetic. He asks tough questions, challenges what we think we know, dives headfirst into the unknown.
And whether you agree with him or not, you got to admire that passion, that curiosity, that commitment to having open conversations.
You do.
And as you continue to explore JRE, think about this. What role does a platform like this play in our world? We're so divided these days. Does it help us understand each other better, bridge those divides, or does it just make things worse?
That's the question, isn't it? No easy answer there.
No, not at all. But one thing's for sure. Joe Rogan's tapped into something powerful, something that resonates with millions of people worldwide.
He's created a space where anything goes. No topic is off limits. The conversation is always changing.
So if you're ready to challenge your own assumptions, expand your horizons, really dive into some deep conversations, maybe it's time to check out the Joe Rogan Experience. You might be surprised by what you find.
You might even end up joining the conversation, adding your own voice to the mix. It's a wild world out there.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Joe Rogan Experience. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
Well, you got to remember, the pandemic, that's when JRE really blew up.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Everyone's stuck at home,
Right.
looking for information, and Rogan's pumping out these, marathon episodes about COVID.
Makes sense.
Talking to doctors, scientists, even some, let's just say, alternative voices.
So the perfect storm, right.
Yeah.
Captive audience, huge topic.
Exactly.
But when did things get controversial? Was it just having those different opinions on there, or was it something more specific?
It got really intense when he started having guests who question, the mainstream narrative. Masks, lockdowns, especially the vaccines.
Oh, why?
Some of these guests were promoting ideas that went directly against, what the CDC and the WHO were saying.
So that's where the misinformation accusations come from.
Exactly.
Especially with vaccines, things got really heated.
It was a sensitive time. People were scared, looking for answers. And some found those answers on Rogan's show, even if those answers weren't, scientifically proven.
Right. And to be fair, he did have on guests who were pro-vaccine who followed the guidelines. It wasn't just one side.
True. He had Dr. Fauci on at one point.
Yeah.
They had a whole conversation about vaccines. But for some people, the issue was that Rogan didn't shut those other views down. He didn't directly contradict them.
So it's that neutral host stance that got him in hot water, even though that's kind of his whole thing, letting the conversation play out, not picking sides.
Yeah, a lot of people had a problem with that. They felt like he was giving equal weight to, these fringe theories and established science, which with his massive audience, they saw as dangerous. There were even people saying Spotify should remove JRE completely or censor some episodes.
Whoa, censor a podcast. That's a bit much, isn't it? What did Spotify actually do?
They did end up taking down a handful of episodes,
Okay.
the ones they thought were, really bad. But for the most part, they stuck by Rogan, saying it was about free speech and open dialogue.
It's a tough situation, for sure. You want to protect people from harmful misinformation, but you also don't want to stifle debate or censor people.
No easy answers there. But it definitely showed how much power a platform like Rogan's has.
Okay, so the COVID stuff was obviously a big deal, but it's not the only area where he's caused controversy, right?
Yeah.
What about his political views? The sources mentioned some heated discussions there, too.
Oh, yeah, he definitely has opinions on politics, and he's not shy about sharing them. That's definitely rubbed some people the wrong way.
Like how so?
Well, he's been called a brocialist, accused of leaning too far right, giving a platform to far-right figures, that kind of thing.
But didn't he endorse Bernie Sanders back in 2020? That doesn't exactly sound far right.
Right. It's not that simple. He's also said positive things about Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. It seems like he's drawn to candidates who are outside the mainstream, whether they're on the left or the right.
So maybe it's less about specific policies and more about this anti-establishment vibe,
Yeah, like being a maverick.
which is kind of like Rogan himself, right?
Exactly.
He likes shaking things up, not following the rules.
Awesome.
And I think that resonates with a lot of his listeners.
Oh, definitely.
It's like he's speaking for people who feel like the system isn't working for them. Whether they agree with his specific views or not, they appreciate that he's challenging the status
I
quo.
think that's a great point, and that's why he's such a fascinating and polarizing figure, right? You can't put him in a box. He's full of contradictions, and he's always pushing boundaries.
Yeah. And whether you love him or hate him, he's getting people talking.
Yeah.
Even if you don't like how he does it, the fact that he's starting these conversations is, well, pretty impressive.
It really is. And for all the controversy, the show is still a massive success. It's consistently ranked as one of the top podcasts worldwide.
So he must be doing something right.
He's definitely doing something right.
Something right, something wrong, something totally out there. It's all part of the Joe Rogan experience.
Yeah.
But controversies aside, let's talk about this empire he's built. We're talking podcasting, UFC commentary, stand-up comedy. He even owns a comedy club. It's more than just a podcast at this point. It's a band.
It is. And that brand is all about authenticity, curiosity, and pushing boundaries. It clearly resonates with a huge audience.
And it's made him incredibly wealthy. The sources mention a net worth somewhere between $150 and $250 million.
Wow.
Not bad for a guy who started doing stand-up in, like, tiny clubs.
Not bad at all.
It really shows you that success these days, it's not just about talent. It's about building that connection with your audience, being authentic, and just going for it.
Absolutely.
So the whole package, the Joe Rogan persona, he's built this empire by just being himself, even when it rubs people the wrong way.
Exactly. And that's a good lesson for all of us, right? Whether you're a podcaster or just trying to figure out your life.
Right.
Being authentic, being curious, taking risks, it can pay off.
All right, we've talked about the controversies, the empire, the Joe Rogan persona. But before we wrap up, let's go back to those topic clusters we mentioned earlier. Because beyond all the headlines and controversy, there's a lot of depth and variety to JRE. It's not all COVID and politics.
Oh yeah, we've just scratched the surface. There are tons of fascinating conversations happening on the show, and we would be remiss if we didn't explore those a bit more.
Right.
So let's dive back in.
All right, let's jump back into those topics. We were talking about Rogan's love for science and tech, right? It's like he's always trying to wrap his head around the big picture, like what's on the cutting edge, where things are going.
It's true, yeah. Like this constant quest for knowledge, and he's bringing us along with him.
Exactly. And it's not just about understanding the science itself. It's about like the implications, the ethical side of it, how it all affects us as humans.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not your typical dry science lecture. He gets excited about it. And that makes it fun to listen to. Remember that episode with Elon Musk talking about colonizing Mars?
Oh, yeah, that one was wild.
I felt like we were right there with him, planning the whole thing.
And it wasn't all just, sci-fi fantasy. They were getting into the nitty-gritty, like the actual challenges, the resources you'd need, the ethical questions about settling another planet.
Right, right. That's what makes it so interesting. It gets you thinking, what would it take to actually live on Mars? What kind of society would we build there? All the risks and rewards.
And those are the questions Rogan loves to dig into.
He does. He's not afraid to get philosophical, talk about the big stuff.
No, not at all.
And speaking of big questions, we can't forget about those episodes where he goes full X-Files.
Oh, man, those are always a trip.
Aliens, UFOs, government conspiracies, the whole 9 yards. He's willing to explore it all.
It's like he's not afraid of anything.
He goes deep down those rabbit holes, talks to people who make you question everything you thought you knew.
It's true. He's had on people who claim they worked on secret government projects, people who say they've encountered aliens, folks who are absolutely convinced the truth is out there.
It's like peeking behind the curtain of what we think is real,
It really is.
Whether you believe any of it or not, it's fascinating to hear these stories, these alternative perspectives.
Totally. And Rogan's not just sitting there taking it all in.
Oh, no, he's not.
He pushes back, asks tough questions, wants proof. He's trying to figure it out, not just entertain.
Right, right. So it's not just about being sensational.
Yeah.
There's a real curiosity there, this desire to understand the unknown, even if it gets a little weird.
Absolutely. And that open-mindedness, that willingness to explore the fringes, it's something a lot of his listeners appreciate, you know?
Yeah, it's like a breath of fresh air,
Hmm.
a break from the mainstream, a chance to think about things that usually get dismissed or ridiculed.
Exactly.
And it's not all aliens and conspiracies either,
I
right?
don't know. I know.
He gets really into personal growth, self-improvement, all that stuff. He's had on former Navy SEALs, athletes, entrepreneurs, talking about overcoming challenges, resilience, achieving your goals.
Oh, those episodes are great. So inspiring. And it's not just about physical strength or business success. It's about like mental toughness, self-discipline, the power of mindset.
Yeah, like those conversations with Jocko Willink and David Goggins, those guys are intense.
They are all about pushing yourself to the limit, physically and mentally.
It's like a boot camp for your brain.
For real.
Yeah,
And it resonates with so many people.
it does.
Whether you're an athlete or a student or just trying to get through life, there's something powerful about those stories of resilience and determination.
It's like Rogan's created this whole community of people who are trying to improve themselves to grow and learn, like a journey of self-discovery, but you're doing it together.
I love that, yeah. And that feeling of connection, it's huge. It's not just you listening to a podcast. You're part of something bigger. This whole tribe of people, all searching for knowledge, trying to be better, understand the world better.
So, taking a step back, what can we say about the Joe Rogan experience? It's obviously more than just a podcast. It's a full-blown phenomenon, a platform for diving into all these fascinating, sometimes controversial topics.
Yeah, it really is. And it's a reflection of Rogan himself, you know? Curious, outspoken, completely unapologetic. He's not afraid to ask the tough questions, challenge what people think, explore the unknown.
Whether you agree with him or not, you have to admire that, right? The passion, the curiosity, the commitment to open, honest conversations.
I think so, for sure.
And as you continue to explore JRE, think about this. What role does a platform like his play in a world that feels so divided? Does it bring people together, help us understand each other better, or does it just make things worse?
That's a great question and a tough one to answer.
It really is. But one thing's clear. Joe Rogan has tapped into something powerful, something that resonates with people all over the world.
He's created this space where anything goes, where no topic is off limits, and the conversation is always changing.
So if you're ready to challenge your own assumptions, to learn new things, to really dive into some deep conversations, maybe it's time to give the Joe Rogan Experience a listen. You might be surprised by what you discover.
You might even find yourself joining the conversation. It's a wild world out there.
It is. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Joe Rogan Experience. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those conversations going.